The commercial airliner shuddered through turbulence at 37,000 feet, passengers gripping armrests as coffee spilled across tray tables. In seat 12F, a weathered man in his 40s adjusted his daughter's seatbelt with calloused hands that had once wrapped around fighter jet controls. Marcus Reaper Caldwell kept his voice steady as he whispered reassurances to 8-year-old Emma, though his pilot instincts screamed that something was catastrophically wrong with their flight path. The Boeing 737's engines whined at frequencies that made Marcus's jaw clench. 23 years of military aviation had taught him to read aircraft like heartbeats, and this bird was dying. Through the small window, he glimpsed two gray shadows materializing from the clouds, F-22 Raptors, their angular stealth profiles cutting through the afternoon sky like mechanical angels of death. The commercial pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, professionally calm but edged with barely contained panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties and will be escorted to the nearest airport as a precautionary measure." Marcus knew better. Those Raptors weren't escorts, they were executioners, maintaining precise formation at a respectful distance. His trained eyes caught the subtle positioning, the way their weapon bays remained sealed but ready. Someone had declared this aircraft a potential threat, and protocol demanded interception. The other passengers saw military protection. Marcus saw a death sentence with wings. Emma tugged at his sleeve, her Disney princess backpack clutched tight against her chest. "Daddy, why are those planes following us?" Her innocent question hit him harder than any enemy fire he'd ever faced. How do you explain to a child that her father's past might have just caught up with them both? The lead Raptor pulled closer, its pilot's helmet barely visible through the canopy. Marcus felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders, muscle memory from countless combat sorties flooding back despite the civilian clothes and the years since he'd last strapped into a cockpit. But this wasn't his fight, or was it? The radio in the cockpit would be crackling with military frequencies, call signs, and clearance codes. Standard interception protocol. The commercial pilots would be sweating, following instructions from air traffic control and military commanders who saw only radar blips and potential threats. They had no idea that the man in seat 12F had once been the ghost that other pilots whispered about in ready rooms across 3 continents. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the familiar pre-mission calm settle over him. Some battles chose you, regardless of retirement papers or promises to leave the war behind. Emma's small hand found his, trusting and warm, and he realized that everything he'd ever fought for was sitting right beside him, asking why the sky had suddenly become so dangerous. The Raptors maintained their vigil, patient as death itself, waiting for orders that could change everything in the span of a radio transmission. Marcus opened his eyes and began calculating angles, distances, and possibilities that most civilians couldn't even imagine. The war might be over for everyone else, but for legends like Reaper Caldwell, it never truly ended. It just waited for the right moment to reclaim its own. The flight attendant approached their row, her smile professionally bright but her hands trembling slightly as she checked seatbelts with unnecessary precision. Marcus caught her eye and saw the recognition there, the way she glanced at his military bearing, the scars on his knuckles, the way he held himself even in civilian clothes. She'd served too, probably Air Force, maybe Navy. The look that passed between them said everything. They both knew this wasn't routine, and they both understood that when F-22s appeared in civilian airspace, someone very important had made a decision that would ripple through lives like shockwaves. "Sir," she whispered, leaning close enough that only he could hear, "the captain would like to speak with you if possible." Her voice carried the weight of military courtesy, the kind reserved for officers who'd earned respect through blood and fire rather than rank alone. Marcus felt Emma's grip tighten on his hand as he nodded once, a gesture that conveyed everything the flight attendant needed to know. The other passengers remained oblivious, most still focused on their phones or magazines, assuming the military escort was simply precautionary. They didn't notice how the flight attendant's posture straightened after speaking to the man in 12F, or how she moved through the cabin with renewed purpose. They couldn't read the subtle signs that Marcus absorbed unconsciously. The way the aircraft's engines had stabilized, the slight course correction that meant they were being guided to a specific destination, rather than the nearest convenient airport. Through the window, the lead F-22 pilot raised a gloved hand in a gesture that was unmistakably military. Not a wave, but a salute. Marcus felt his breath catch as he realized the pilot had somehow identified him, despite the civilian clothes and the years since his active service. The ghost of his reputation had preceded him into this crisis, and now everyone involved would know exactly who was sitting in seat 12F of a potentially compromised civilian aircraft. Emma looked up at him with eyes that held the same steel-gray determination he'd passed down to her, though she was too young to understand its significance. "Daddy, are you going to help them?" Her question carried the intuitive wisdom that children sometimes possessed, the ability to see through complexity to the heart of truth. Marcus smiled and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and the innocence that he'd spent his career protecting. "Maybe, sweetheart, maybe I am." The captain's voice returned to the intercom, but this time Marcus heard something different, hope, mixed with the kind of reverence reserved for legends who'd proven themselves beyond doubt. The game had changed, and everyone in the sky knew it. The man in seat 12F wasn't just another passenger anymore. He was Reaper Caldwell, and his presence had just transformed a potential disaster into something else entirely. An opportunity for the kind of precision and expertise that had made his call sign whispered in both fear and admiration across military installations worldwide. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, his movements carrying the fluid confidence of someone who'd never forgotten how to command respect, even in civilian clothes. Emma watched him with the unwavering faith that only a daughter could have in her father, and Marcus realized that the most important mission of his life was about to begin, not in the cockpit of a fighter jet, but in the passenger cabin of a commercial airliner, where the stakes had never been higher and the margin for error had never been smaller. The cockpit door opened with a soft electronic chime, and the flight attendant gestured for Marcus to follow. As he moved down the narrow aisle, other passengers began to notice. The way crew members stepped aside with subtle deference, the straightening of shoulders among those who recognized military bearing when they saw it. Word was spreading through the cabin in the mysterious way that awareness spreads through crowds. Something significant was happening, and the man from 12F was at the center of it. Captain Patricia Storm Rodriguez had been flying commercial aircraft for 8 years, but her previous 15 years in the Air Force had taught her to recognize legends when they walked into her cockpit. The weathered man who stepped through the door carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that came from commanding respect in the world's most dangerous airspace. She'd heard the stories, the whispered accounts of impossible missions and enemy pilots who simply vanished when Reaper Caldwell appeared on their radar screens. "Captain Caldwell," she said, her voice carrying the formal respect of one military officer addressing another, regardless of current duty status. "I'm Storm Rodriguez. We have a situation, and frankly, we could use your expertise." She gestured toward the radio panel, where military frequencies crackled with terse communications between air traffic control, the escorting F-22s, and what sounded like a command center somewhere far below. Marcus took in the cockpit with the rapid assessment of someone trained to process critical information under pressure. The instrument readings told him everything he needed to know about their aircraft's condition, while the radio chatter revealed the larger picture, a potential threat that had triggered the highest levels of military response. But there was something else, something in the way the F-22 pilots spoke to each other that suggested they knew exactly who was aboard this aircraft. "What's the threat assessment?" he asked, sliding into the jump seat with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged in cockpits. His hands moved instinctively toward controls and instruments, muscle memory overriding years of civilian life as his pilot instincts engaged fully for the first time since retirement. Storm handed him a headset, and Marcus immediately tuned into the military frequencies. The voice that came through was crisp, professional, and carried the kind of authority that made even experienced pilots straighten in their seats. Escort flight. Be advised that Reaper is on board the civilian aircraft. Repeat, Reaper Caldwell is on board. Adjust protocols accordingly and maintain respectful distance until further orders. The F-22 pilot's responses were immediate and telling. Copy that, control. Adjusting formation to honor guard position. There was something almost reverent in the lead pilot's voice, the kind of tone reserved for encountering living legends. Marcus felt the weight of his reputation settling around him like an old, familiar coat, one he'd hoped to never wear again, but that fit as perfectly as the day he'd first earned his wings. Through the cockpit windows, he watched the Raptors shift into a formation he recognized. Not an interception pattern, but an honor escort. These pilots weren't treating him as a potential threat. They were treating him as a returning hero, someone whose service had earned their deepest respect, and whose presence transformed this crisis into something approaching a homecoming. Emma appeared in the cockpit doorway, having followed her father despite the flight attendant's gentle attempts to keep passengers seated. Her wide eyes took in the complex array of instruments and displays with the same analytical intelligence that Marcus recognized in himself. "Daddy, why are all the pilots talking about you on the radio?" She'd been listening, of course. His daughter had inherited his ability to pay attention to details that others missed. Storm looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows, clearly wondering how he would explain his legendary status to an 8-year-old who knew her father as the man who made pancakes on Sunday mornings and helped with homework every night. The radio crackled again with references to Reaper and the Ghost Pilot, call signs that had become mythical among military aviators, but were just Daddy's old work stories to Emma. "Sometimes, sweetheart," Marcus said, lifting Emma onto his lap where she could see out the cockpit windows, "people remember when you were good at your job, and sometimes they need that person to help them again, even after you thought you were done helping." He pointed to the F-22s flying alongside them, their sleek forms cutting through the sky with predatory grace. "Those pilots out there, they know that I used to do what they do. And right now, they need someone with experience to help solve a problem." The lead Raptor pilot's voice came through the headset again, this time directed specifically at their aircraft. "Commercial flight, please advise Reaper that Viper Squadron considers it an honor to escort him home. We've heard the stories, sir, and we're ready to follow your lead on whatever comes next." Marcus keyed the radio with practiced ease, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded squadrons across multiple combat theaters. "Viper Flight, this is Reaper. Appreciate the escort, but let's keep this professional. I'm just a passenger today, trying to get my daughter home safely." But even as he said the words, both he and every pilot listening knew that Reaper Caldwell was never just a passenger. He was a force of nature that had temporarily assumed civilian form, and his presence had just changed the trajectory of whatever crisis was unfolding in the skies above them. The transformation in Storm's cockpit was immediate and palpable. Where moments before there had been barely controlled tension and the weight of an unknown threat, now there was the calm efficiency of professionals working alongside a living legend. Marcus's presence had shifted the entire dynamic from crisis management to collaborative problem-solving, and every pilot involved understood that they were now part of something that would be discussed in ready rooms and officer clubs for years to come. "Reaper," Storm said, her voice carrying a mixture of professional respect and genuine curiosity. "The threat briefing suggests possible hostile intentions from an unknown aircraft that went dark about 30 minutes ago. Military command believes it might be targeting civilian flights, but the intelligence is sketchy at best. They're treating every commercial aircraft as potentially compromised until they can verify the threat level." Marcus nodded, his mind automatically shifting into the tactical analysis mode that had kept him alive through countless combat sorties. Electronic signatures. Last known position. What about radar gaps or communication blackouts in the area? His questions came rapid fire, each one revealing the depth of his operational knowledge and his ability to cut through uncertainty to reach actionable intelligence. Emma watched her father transform before her eyes, though she didn't fully understand what she was witnessing. The gentle man who read her bedtime stories was becoming someone else, someone whose voice carried the weight of command, and whose questions made experienced pilots lean forward with attention. She could see why the other pilots spoke about him with such reverence. Even she could feel the change in the cockpit's atmosphere when her father engaged his professional mindset. Unknown bogey went silent approximately 40 miles northeast of our current position, Storm replied, consulting her instruments. Last radar signature suggested military-grade capabilities, but the aircraft wasn't responding to identification requests. Command thinks it might be stolen or compromised equipment, possibly targeting commercial flights to maximize casualties and psychological impact. The tactical picture began forming in Marcus's mind with the clarity that had made him legendary among his peers. A rogue military aircraft, probably stolen or hijacked, operating in civilian airspace with hostile intent. The kind of scenario that demanded exactly the skills he'd spent decades perfecting, the ability to think like both hunter and hunted simultaneously. Time frame for potential intercept, he asked, already calculating angles and probabilities. Approximately 12 minutes if current trajectories hold, Storm answered, her respect for Marcus's tactical acumen evident in the way she deferred to his assessment. But Reaper, you're not cleared for military operations anymore. Your retirement status means... Retirement status is just paperwork, Marcus interrupted gently, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who'd never truly left the warrior mindset behind. And sometimes paperwork doesn't matter when lives are at stake. He looked down at Emma, who was absorbing every word with the intense focus she'd inherited from him. Besides, I have the most important reason in the world to make sure this threat gets neutralized safely. The F-22 escorts had been monitoring their communications, and the lead pilot's voice crackled through with barely contained excitement. Reaper, this is Viper Lead. If you're thinking what we think you're thinking, we need to advise that civilian aircraft aren't equipped for tactical operations. But if anyone could figure out how to make it work, it would be you, sir. Marcus smiled grimly, his mind already working through possibilities that would have seemed impossible to anyone without his unique combination of experience and creativity. Viper Lead, I'm not planning to turn a Boeing 737 into a fighter jet. But I am planning to use every advantage we have, including the fact that our potential adversary probably thinks this is just another helpless civilian target. His fingers moved across the cockpit instruments with professional familiarity, as he began forming a plan that would require precise coordination and the kind of split-second timing that had made his reputation. The radio crackled with incoming transmissions from military command centers, air traffic control, and additional aircraft being vectored toward their position. Marcus recognized the controlled chaos of a major military response mobilizing around a credible threat, but he also heard something else in the communications, a deference to his presence that suggested his reputation had reached even the highest levels of command authority. Emma tugged at his sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, are the bad guys coming for us?" Her question cut through all the tactical analysis and radio chatter to reach the heart of what mattered most. Marcus looked into his daughter's eyes and saw not fear, but trust, absolute faith that her father would protect her no matter what threats emerged from the sky around them. "Not if I can help it, sweetheart," he said, his voice carrying the promise of a father and the determination of a warrior who'd never lost a battle when the stakes truly mattered. "Not if I can help it." The airspace around them was filling with military aircraft as additional F-22s and support elements converged on their position. What had begun as a routine commercial flight had become the center of a major military operation, with one retired pilot and his 8-year-old daughter at the heart of a developing crisis that would test everything Marcus had learned about combat, leadership, and the thin line between civilian life and the warrior's calling that never truly released its grip on those who'd served at the highest levels. Air traffic control's voice cut through the military chatter with clinical precision. All aircraft, be advised we have radar contact with unknown bogey at bearing 047, distance 38 miles and closing. Unknown aircraft is not responding to identification requests and appears to be on intercept course with civilian traffic. The words carried the weight of confirmed threat assessment, transforming speculation into tactical reality. Marcus felt the familiar pre-combat calm settle over him as his mind automatically shifted into the heightened awareness state that had kept him alive through more than 200 combat sorties. Every detail of the cockpit became hyper-focused, every sound and instrument reading feeding into a comprehensive tactical picture that few pilots could maintain under pressure. "Storm, I need you to trust me and follow my guidance exactly. We're about to become part of the solution rather than just the problem." "Copy that, Reaper," Storm replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. Military training had taught her to recognize competence under pressure, and everything about Marcus's demeanor conveyed the kind of professional confidence that came from facing impossible odds and finding ways to prevail. "What do you need from me?" Emma remained quiet in her father's lap, her small hands gripping his forearms as she sensed the tension building around them. She didn't fully understand the danger they were facing, but she could feel her father's transformation from civilian dad to something else entirely, something that made even experienced pilots defer to his judgment and follow his lead without question. "First, we need to change our flight profile to something less predictable," Marcus said, his hands moving across the instrument panel with practiced efficiency. "Commercial flights follow standard approaches and routes, which makes them easy targets. We're going to deviate from normal patterns and force our bogey to react to us instead of following a predetermined attack plan." The F-22 escorts acknowledged his strategy immediately, their formation shifting to provide protective coverage while allowing the commercial aircraft maximum maneuvering room. "Reaper, this is Viper Lead. We're ready to follow your tactical assessment. What's the engagement protocol?" Marcus keyed the radio with the calm authority that had once directed complex air operations across multiple theaters of conflict. "Viper Flight, maintain defensive positioning until we can positively identify hostile intent. I want this bogey to reveal its capabilities and intentions before we commit to any aggressive action. Sometimes the best way to spring a trap is to make yourself look like vulnerable bait." The strategy was classic Reaper Caldwell, using apparent weakness to lure enemies into revealing their true capabilities and intentions before striking with overwhelming precision. It was the tactical approach that had made him legendary among military aviators, the ability to think several moves ahead while maintaining the patience to execute complex plans under extreme pressure. "Bogey is now at 32 miles and maintaining intercept course," Air Traffic Control reported. "Flight characteristics suggest military fighter aircraft, possibly modified for extended range operations. We're coordinating with NORAD for additional threat assessment and response authorization." Marcus nodded grimly as the tactical picture became clearer. A rogue fighter aircraft, probably stolen from a military installation or supplied by hostile actors, operating with the specific intent to attack civilian targets. The kind of threat that required not just military response, but the kind of creative thinking that bridged the gap between conventional tactics and unconventional solutions. "Emma," he said softly, his voice maintaining the gentle tone he used for bedtime stories despite the crisis developing around them, "I need you to be very brave for a few minutes. Daddy has to help the other pilots solve a problem, but I promise everything is going to be okay." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo and drawing strength from the trust he saw in her eyes. The little girl nodded solemnly, her intelligence evident in the way she processed the situation despite her age. "Are you going to fly the plane, Daddy?" Her question revealed her intuitive understanding that her father was somehow central to resolving whatever crisis they were facing. "Not exactly, sweetheart," Marcus replied, his attention divided between his daughter and the developing tactical situation. "But I am going to help the pilots figure out the best way to keep everyone safe." His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced similar challenges before and found ways to prevail against overwhelming odds. The bogey aircraft was now close enough for the F-22's advanced sensors to begin providing detailed intelligence about its capabilities and configuration. "Reaper, this is Viper lead with updated threat assessment. Bogey appears to be a modified MiG-29, probably stolen or supplied through black market channels. Configuration suggests air-to-air missiles and possibly air-to-surface capabilities. This is definitely a credible threat to civilian aircraft." Marcus absorbed the intelligence with the rapid processing capability that had made him legendary among tactical planners. A MiG-29 was a formidable adversary, fast and maneuverable with sufficient firepower to destroy multiple civilian targets before defensive forces could respond effectively. But it was also a known quantity, an aircraft whose capabilities and limitations he'd studied extensively during his active service years. "Viper flight, maintain current formation, but be ready to engage on my signal," Marcus transmitted, his voice carrying the calm authority that had once coordinated complex air operations across hostile territory. "I want to force this bogey to reveal its intentions before we commit to any irreversible actions. Sometimes patience is the deadliest weapon in the arsenal." The commercial airliner continued its modified flight path, deviating from standard routes in ways that would force the hostile aircraft to adapt its attack plan in real time. Marcus was using the Boeing 737 as bait, drawing the enemy into a tactical situation where the F-22 escorts would have maximum advantage when the engagement finally began. Storm watched her passenger with growing admiration as he transformed her cockpit into a tactical command center, directing military aircraft with the easy competence of someone born to lead in high-pressure situations. "Reaper, how did you know this was going to happen? The way you're handling this suggests you were expecting trouble." "I wasn't expecting this specific threat," Marcus replied, his eyes never leaving the instrument panel as he monitored their position relative to both the escorts and the approaching bogey. "But I've learned that trouble has a way of finding people like me, even when we're trying to live quiet civilian lives. The key is staying ready to respond when the moment comes, because there's never enough time to prepare after the shooting starts." Emma shifted in his lap, her small voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. "Daddy, the bad pilot doesn't know that you're here, does he?" Her observation revealed the tactical insight she'd inherited from her father, the ability to see through complexity to identify the critical advantage that could determine the outcome of any conflict. "That's right, sweetheart," Marcus said, pride evident in his voice as he recognized his own analytical abilities in his daughter. "The bad pilot thinks he's attacking a helpless airplane full of scared people. He doesn't know that sometimes the most dangerous person in the sky is the one who looks like just another passenger." His smile was grim, but confident, the expression of a warrior who'd found himself exactly where he needed to be when everything that mattered was on the line. The bogey was now 18 miles out and closing fast, its radar signature indicating attack configuration and hostile intent. The F-22 escorts had positioned themselves perfectly for defensive engagement, but everyone involved understood that the success of their response would depend entirely on the tactical genius of the retired pilot, who transformed a routine commercial flight into the command center for a precision military operation that would be studied in tactical schools for generations to come. All aircraft Be advised that bogey has achieved missile lock on civilian aircraft. Air traffic control announced with barely controlled tension. Threat is now imminent and engagement is authorized. The words carried the weight of life-and-death decision-making, the moment when theories and preparations gave way to action and consequences that couldn't be undone. Marcus felt time slow as his combat instincts engaged fully for the first time in years. Every detail of the tactical situation crystallized in his mind with perfect clarity. The positions of friendly aircraft, the capabilities and limitations of the threat, the civilians depending on his expertise to survive the next few minutes. This was the moment he'd trained for throughout his military career, when everything came down to split-second decisions and the kind of precision that separated legends from casualties. Viper lead, execute defensive engagement now, he transmitted with the calm authority of someone who directed countless life-and-death operations. Priority is civilian protection, but I want that bogey neutralized before it can threaten any other aircraft in the area. His voice carried the weight of command authority that made experienced military pilots respond without hesitation or doubt. The F-22s moved with the lethal grace that had made them the most feared air superiority fighters in the world. Their missiles streaked through the sky with precision that would have been impossible without Marcus's tactical coordination, each shot carefully calculated to eliminate the threat, while minimizing any risk to civilian aircraft or populated areas below. The hostile MiG-29 never had a chance to execute its attack plan. Faced with coordinated defensive fire from multiple F-22s directed by one of the most tactically gifted pilots in aviation history, it was destroyed cleanly and efficiently, its wreckage falling harmlessly into unpopulated wilderness areas far below the commercial flight corridors. Threat neutralized, Viper lead reported with professional satisfaction. Bogey is down and civilian aircraft are secure. Reaper, that was textbook tactical coordination. It's been an honor to fly under your guidance, sir. Marcus felt the familiar post-combat calm settling over him as the immediate danger passed and normal flight operations resumed around them. Emma looked up at him with eyes that held new understanding of who her father really was beneath the civilian clothes and suburban dad routine. She'd witnessed her father's transformation from passenger to tactical commander, and though she didn't fully comprehend what had happened, she understood that her daddy was someone very special indeed. "Is it over, Daddy?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying the resilience that he'd hoped to pass on to her along with his analytical intelligence and tactical instincts. "Yes, sweetheart," Marcus replied, his voice returning to the gentle tone she knew best even as his mind continued processing the tactical lessons and implications of what had just occurred. "The bad pilot is gone, and now we can finish our trip home safely." He hugged her close, drawing comfort from her warmth and the knowledge that his most important mission, protecting his daughter, had been accomplished successfully. Storm turned in her pilot's seat to look at Marcus with an expression that mixed professional respect with genuine awe. "Reaper, I've been flying for more than 20 years, military and civilian, and I've never seen anything like what just happened. The way you coordinated that engagement, the tactical awareness, the split-second timing, it was like watching a master class in air combat leadership." "Experience and training," Marcus replied modestly, though he couldn't entirely suppress the satisfaction of knowing that his skills remained sharp despite years of retirement. Plus the advantage of flying with some of the best pilots in the world. Those F-22 jockeys did all the hard work. I just helped them coordinate their efforts. But everyone involved knew that Marcus's contribution had been far more significant than tactical coordination. His presence had transformed a potential disaster into a precision military operation. His reputation had ensured immediate cooperation from military assets, and his expertise had neutralized a credible threat with minimal risk to civilian lives. The man in seat 12F had proven once again why the call sign Reaper was spoken with reverence in ready rooms across the world. The commercial airliner resumed its normal flight path toward their destination, escorted by the F-22s that had become honor guards rather than defensive interceptors. The other passengers remained largely unaware of how close they'd come to disaster, or how the quiet man from 12F had just saved their lives through a combination of tactical genius and the kind of courage that defined true military leadership. Emma fell asleep in her father's lap as the aircraft settled into routine cruise flight, her small body relaxed and secure in the knowledge that her daddy would always protect her from whatever dangers might emerge from the vast sky around them. Marcus held her close and watched the sun setting through the cockpit windows, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with flying in the first place. The radio crackled with messages of congratulation and respect from military commanders, air traffic controllers, and fellow pilots who'd monitored the engagement from positions across the country. Marcus, Reaper, Caldwell had reminded everyone why legends never truly retire. They simply wait for the moment when their unique combination of skills and experience becomes the thin line between disaster and survival. As the aircraft descended toward their destination airport, Marcus reflected on the strange turns that life could take. He'd boarded this flight as a civilian single father, hopping for nothing more than a quiet trip home with his daughter. But fate had other plans, and once again he'd found himself at the center of events that would be discussed and analyzed for years to come. The warrior's calling had reached out to reclaim him, if only temporarily, and he'd answered with the same precision and dedication that had defined his entire military career. The landing was smooth and professional, a testament to Storm's skills as a pilot and the calm that had settled over the aircraft after the successful resolution of the crisis. As passengers began gathering their belongings and preparing to disembark, many of them still unaware of how dramatically their flight had deviated from routine, Marcus helped Emma organize her backpack and prepare for the short walk to the terminal. "Daddy," Emma said as they prepared to leave the aircraft, "will you tell me the whole story someday, about what really happened up there?" Her question revealed the mature intelligence that would someday make her formidable in whatever career she chose, the ability to recognize significant events even when she didn't fully understand their implications. "Someday, sweetheart," Marcus promised, his voice carrying the weight of a father's love and a warrior's pride in having successfully protected what mattered most. "When you're older, I'll tell you about the day your old dad got to fly with heroes one more time, and how sometimes the most important battles are the ones that save the people we love most." The F-22 escorts maintained their honor formation until the commercial aircraft was safely on the ground, their pilots offering final salutes to the legend, who'd reminded them all why the Warriors' Code demanded excellence in every moment of crisis. As Marcus and Emma walked through the terminal toward baggage claim, he knew that his quiet retirement had been permanently altered by the events of the afternoon, but he also knew that he'd answered the call with the same precision and dedication that had defined his entire military career. The story would be told and retold in ready rooms and officer clubs for generations. The day that Reaper Caldwell emerged from retirement to coordinate one of the most precisely executed air defense operations in recent history. But for Marcus, the only story that mattered was the one his daughter would remember, the day her daddy proved that heroes never really retire. They just wait for the moment when their unique gifts are needed to protect the people they love most in a dangerous world that never stops testing the courage of those willing to stand between innocence and harm.